Good. So Martín Yerulo is a social worker and Master of Social Policy from the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina. He's professor and researcher at Universidad de Buenos Aires and National University of Moreno. Whereas Bárbara Lavecchi is a social worker also from the University of Buenos Aires. She's a member of the professional team of the program of training and strengthening for social and community organizations. That is a program that they will be sharing with us this afternoon for you. So, Martín, Bárbara, the floor is yours.
Martín,
Ahí estamos.
I'm sorry. My mic was muted. Good afternoon to you all. Good morning to us here in this part of the world. It is a pleasure for us to be here taking part in this webinar with you and to be able to share our own experience from different parts of the world. Today, we are brought together by the field in which we work, social work, and we are going to talk specifically about university engagement and service learning experiences. These are the things that we have in common. It is extremely important for me to be able to take part here. I was a member of CLAIS in the past. I worked with Nieves Tapia for many years. And I'm also part of the program that Barbara is going to talk about. I was a student until 2004, and then I continued participating there as a graduate person. I also had my master's degree related to the topics covered by the program. So these are fields that are very dear to my heart, and they are an important part of my professional career. Let me see if I can share my screen. I'm sharing my screen now. Can you see it? Great. Let us try to find our place here. It is important for you to know that we will be talking about Argentina, more specifically Buenos Aires in the south of the Americas. And just to give you some context, let me share some information about the characteristics of our university system and social work in Argentina. This is for you to understand the features of this experience. In Argentina, we have public education. There is university autonomy. Universities are autonomous. They are economically autarkical, so they manage their own budgets. There is quite a long university tradition. We have universities that have been leading institutions in Latin America. Just for you to understand how the university system works in Argentina in 1918, there was a significant reform. The starting point of that reform was a demonstration and a protest by students and faculty, and that led to the current university system. An extension outreach was considered one of the university pillars. At that time, universities were more of an elite. They had more restricted access. But after that protest, they started changing their mindset and their relations with others. So there was a convergence between the university and the community and the territory. So that was a result of that university reform. And we can see the impact of that reform even today. And then there is a governance in universities. Many of Argentine publicly owned universities are co-governed by students, teachers, and graduates. In 1949, there was another important milestone for Argentine universities. Studying at the university is free of charge. There is no fee that students have to pay. So that is quite a peculiar characteristic for us Argentinians. This is quite naturalized because this is part of our public policy making in the field of education. But we know that this is not the case everywhere in the world. So we have universities that are free of charge and public universities. We have more than 2 million students in Argentina with a population of almost 45 million inhabitants. 2 million are studying at university. 59% of them are women. So this speaks to the importance of providing access to universities. There is no gender-related restriction, and there are 57 national universities, and together with other private universities, in total, they amount to 112 universities. We will be talking about the most important university in Argentina, given the number of students and its track record. This is the University of Buenos Aires, UBA. It has more than 320,000 students, more than 31,000 faculty members. It is a large university organized into 13 schools. One of the schools is the School of Social Sciences, and social work is part of that school. This university was created in 1821. Last year, we celebrated the 200th anniversary of the university, the bicentennial. So just to give you an idea of the place of social work in this university, the first course of social work, the first program in social work dates back from 1930. There is a university that is called the Argentine Social Museum University. Although at the University of Buenos Aires, there were some other courses that could be the pioneering courses for safety professionals. The first social work program dates back from 1930, and social work in the University of Buenos Aires exists since 1941. At that time, it was part of the School of Law because it was considered to be an ancillary program to the program in law, but then social work started having a more relevant role it was present in different discussions, and there was a discussion to rethink this discipline. Between 1976 and 1983 in Argentina, we had a military dictatorship. And after that military dictatorship government, the university was reorganized, and this led to the creation of the School of Social Sciences in 1988. And social work, together with other 4 programs, became part of this school. Social work is a program with an undergraduate degree. It's a licenciatura. Students have to study for 5 years, and there are approximately 2,000 students in this program. So this is just to set the framework for you to understand the importance of our program within the university, and for you also to understand how social work is approached in the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina. Having said this, after this brief introduction, now I'd like to share with you how we envisage service learning into social work related programs. there is some tension here. We always talk about the balance that needs to be struck. Here you see the scales, and here you see two sides. When we think about service learning projects, university engagement projects, we see some tension between two poles or two aspects. On the one hand, everything that has to do with academic training, institutionalization, whether these are all these content that is mandatory for students, and the curricular aspect. And this is very interesting because this is one of the components of the projects. Service learning projects intend to be projects that educate students, that provide students with tools, notions, knowledge, academic knowledge, procedural knowledge, and then the focus is placed on students. But unlike merely educational activities, the focus is also placed on community activities, community engagement activities. So we need to see how much of that focus exists in community needs, how much of the service component is substantial, and how these actions can be sustained over time. So I think it is important to analyze the experiences that we can share with you and see how the tension is addressed. Is the focus placed on students' education or on the service provided to the community? I think this is an interesting point. I was listening to a previous presentation from Africa and the video that they shared, the video with Margaret. So I think that was a clear illustration of the situation. There were more than 30 students that went through Margaret's life over the years as part of that university action. And that had to do with the learning component. But then we need to ask ourselves about the quality of that service to see how dense the community intervention is. When we talk about density, we talk about how it addresses the community needs. To what extent it focuses on the community's needs and not only on the university's needs. And I think that there lies the discussion between these two aspects that will always be there in service learning and community university engagement projects. The University of Buenos Aires recently, I think it was 2010, but in 2022 established the mandatory nature of service learning practices. It is 40 hours that all students in all programs in the University of Buenos Aires have to devote to social educational practices. Implementation was delayed, especially with the pandemic. The mandatory requirement was going to be implemented earlier, but because of a resolution at the higher level, they decided that this year these activities would be mandatory when students go back to the classroom. Every program will address these practices differently. These are not too many hours compared to the syllabus. 40 hours is quite a small module. These practices can be quite heterogeneous because every university school may address them differently. In the case of social work, in particular, there is already some tradition of carrying out this kind of professional practices. In the University of Buenos Aires, we have 540 hours of professional practices spread over the course of 3 years. So this practices are like the backbone of the program. The program is structured at different levels that we call workshops, and they connect with the different topics, the different subjects in the curriculum. If you have 2,000 students, you can imagine that in order for students to engage in these practices, there need to be agreements with different entities and different governmental and non-governmental organizations. Approximately 230 governmental and non-governmental organizations are involved in these practices. These practices require quite a lot of time devoted during the whole program. They have an intentional connection with the curricular content that is deliberate. But if we look at this from the optics of the scales that I was presenting before, everything that has to do with practices, well, focus is more on students because practices are part of the training of students. The focus is placed more on students rather than on the service, on the intervention that they can have in the community. And this is usually what happens in all practices. I can tell you about different experiences that have been developed over the years as part of these working practices, but these practices are focused more on students training, and the community intervention is important, of course. It has an important role, but the focus is on the students. So there are some actions that were carried out, and you may find them useful, and they may be replicated in other academic units. These are actions that were adopted over the last few years. And they aimed at a more robust community intervention. In social work, there was a change in the syllabus in 2012. The syllabus change led to some changes that had already been discussed for some years within the School of Social Sciences. One of these changes have to do with doing away with the former structure of social work at different levels of intervention, the idea of social work based on cases, based on groups, and based on the community. So this division into different levels of intervention that existed in the 1960s in Argentina, and that structured for many years the syllabuses of the programs, not only in the University of Buenos Aires, but also in other universities, and that model was challenged. And we believe that these levels of intervention are not in accordance with reality. Usually in real life, the interventions have to be done in different ways. So I think that this is an important point that helped rethink these practices without using these levels that are artificially created at an academic level, but had little to do with real-life interventions in communities. And then we had the first and second year of practices that were unified. At the beginning, we had differentiated practices for first and second year students, but then it was decided that they should follow a common process. And there is the same teacher. This enabled to have more flexibility. Students were not expected to focus only on 4 months goals, but rather 2-year goals. So this was more adaptable to the organization's needs, not the university. So in this kind of practices, it is very important to establish this communication between the organizational needs and the academic requirements. So there needs to be a bridge between those two aspects, and efforts were made to unify these practices in this way. But this is not the only way in which service learning and community engagement projects are carried out in social work. It is important to consider also research projects that cater to the needs of community organizations. We have a lot of cases of research groups that work closely with the territories, doing diagnosis, providing support. They carry out actions that aim at attending the needs of those communities. We also find projects that could be classified as volunteering projects. Usually, they start upon the initiative of some faculty member or students. Sometimes there are political organizations that are present in the university and they undertake these projects. These are volunteering projects and they are quite heterogeneous. Some of them last over time, others have a finite life. In the project team, sometimes you see a greater participation of students, and in others, that is not the case. They address different topics. So in this kind of projects, we see that there is a high level of motivation because those that participate in these projects do so because they choose to. And they do so because they are activists but the truth is that there is not such a strong connection with the curricular content. And since they are so heterogeneous, these projects may be quite specific. Unlike other programs where you see different chairs and subjects leading the projects in social work, perhaps you have some subjects where you don't see so many community intervention projects because the workshops in social work are very important and they take a lot of time. So faculty members do not present proposals to students because that would mean devoting even more time outside of those workshops. And of course, just to complete this picture, then we have extension projects. So we have social work where with an extension secretariat, there is an office for extension activities and different projects are carried out there. Usually these projects involved different programs. Many of them have a high level of institutionalization because they are conceived at the top. Unlike what I mentioned before, the focus here is placed on community needs, how the university can address the needs of the territories, of the communities, and probably the weakest link here is the intentional connection with curricular content, because these projects are not part of the curriculum, they are not part of the syllabus, they are projects that require voluntary participation. This is just to depict the situation. We are going to explain to you a university extension project from the School of Social Sciences that is the training and strengthening program that Barbara is going to describe to us. But that project comes as part of these extension projects, projects at the university level. They have been in place for 20 years, and they are aimed at providing a solution to community needs. And we see that there is a weak curricular connection with the different subjects in these projects. Just some food for thought here. About these experiences in our field of work. I'm going to share with you some challenges. This is a definition of an Argentinian social worker, Susana Casaniga, who was a leader in social work in Argentina. She went back to Freud's definition of what would be an impossible job. Freud, in the foreword to a book, says that psychoanalysis, just like the habits of governing and educating, become an impossible task, an impossible job. This is quite an interesting idea, because this has to do with the nature of our intervention. And Susana Casaniga states that if social work had been known by Freud at that time, he would have considered social work as the fourth impossible job or task, especially here where we talk about social work. This idea of an impossible task has to do with the fact that we work with others. We cannot just do the intervention on our own. We need to work with others who also make decisions, who also think, who also have feelings. Other people who, just like us, do not necessarily follow the rules of logic, because sometimes we have an idea for an intervention that originates in the cause-effect logical models. We start from that idea of cause and effect, and if I do this, I will get this response. But human beings are contradictory. Sometimes we think about something, but we end up doing just the opposite. And this kind of contradiction is not part only of a human situation, it's part of the nature of the social work. So the nature of what is social is complex, is contradictory. We may think that is rhizome thinking, like the Luz and Guattari state. This is a complex rhizome. So this is an intervention process that cannot be easily solved. And I think that this puts us as professionals in a different position. Casaniga raises this idea of leaving aside the troubleshooting mandate. Sometimes social workers believe that we need to do troubleshooting, that we need to solve everybody's problems. There seems to be this mandate for us. And sometimes this goes beyond our capabilities. She process, this will put us in between two extremes where we think that we can do everything, that then in reality we realize that we can't do much. This is part of social reality. We believe that social transformation is an individual process. It is when it becomes a university process, then we are confronted with a harsh reality because this is a collective process. So the social work turns into an impossible job. The same applies to social transformation. It is impossible because we work with individuals, we work in a complex society, and the collective efforts are at the center of transformation. Transformation cannot be done alone by universities, that they have to be done as part of a collective effort. And then let me share some thoughts about the pandemic and how we have lived during the last 2 years and how we had to reinvent our in-person connections. Now we have to wear these masks. If we were in an in-person meeting today, we would have to be wearing the face masks and we wouldn't be able to see each other's expressions. In Argentina, the way we relate to one another is quite body-centered. We tend to hug one another, to hold each other's hands. We have that kind of interventions, but today we have some limits set by the pandemic. One of the biggest challenges in social work has to do with reinventing these face-to-face interactions in a post-pandemic period. And I think this is an important topic for discussion because our institutions, our habits have changed, and this is going to change intervention processes as well. Another challenge that I can mention has to do with appreciating the intangible dimension of social interventions. We tend to look at these interventions in economic terms, thinking about material things, solving a need with a concrete, tangible, material good product, something that is tangible, that is visible. But professional interventions and the kind of projects that we carry out also involve ties among people, emotions, how we present ourselves to the world, empowerment processes. So these have to do with an intangible dimension. And I think that we need to consider this because this attaches value to our task. And in community engagement and service learning projects, we need to pay attention to this element. We cannot just provide something material. We need to think what is happening to us, what is happening to others. Is the university that tells the community what they have to do, or is it a different relationship, something that changes our way of thinking? Another Argentine social worker, who is Alfredo Carballeda, said that in interventions, we have open looks and listening. We need to be open enough to observe the reality and also to listen actively. He says that the intervention never happens in advance. We cannot build that intervention beforehand. We can plan for that intervention, but later on, once we have been involved with that intervention, we may reform it, we may change it. This is just the framework that I can present to you for discussion. I was talking with Luz about which experience I should choose to present here. I was part of the program years ago. I have very nice memories. That was very important for my own professional development. But I wanted to share with you an experience that would be illustrative, that perhaps does not talk about these professional practices, but it involves a project at the University of Buenos Aires with involvement of the social work program. And this is the program for training and strengthening of community organizations. So now I'm going to give the floor to Barbara so that she can talk about that program specifically. Thank you, Martin. Good morning, good afternoon to you all. As Martin was telling you, the program is a training and strengthening program for social and community organizations. It is quite a long name, so we may just call it the program here. It is under the Secretary's Office of University Extension and the School of or in the University of Buenos Aires. It was created at a time where we had social and economic difficulties, where community and social organizations came into the scene, and they had a relevant role in the society and also in demanding things from the state. That was a time of crisis, and those who were leading the School of Social Sciences and the Secretary's Office decided to go back to extension activities and to make the university more engaged with the community needs. So a proposal was put forward to strengthen these territorial association experiences. And in 2002, a course for community organizations was developed. It was quite significant because it opened the doors of the university to a sector of the population that did not have access to university. Although we have a free of charge university, sometimes certain groups in the population do not have access to universities. So this meant that several community groups were able to come closer to the university. They brought their struggles, their sufferings, their knowledge, their practices, and a nice exchange was started, an exchange of experiences. And we are about to celebrate the 20th anniversary of this kind of activity. In the program, we claim that over these 20 years, we have turned into a community of meaning, a community made up by leaders of community organizations in the city of Buenos Aires and the other areas in the province of Buenos Aires, the metropolitan areas we call it. These are urban organizations that want to change the reality around them. They try to address concrete needs of their communities, and it is quite a heterogeneous group. You have child development centers, you have soup kitchens, women's groups, ecumenical groups, cultural groups. So we have a wide range of organizations, but the key here is that these organizations are carrying out actions in the territories they are inserted in. So this community has leaders from community organizations, undergraduate and graduate students that join the program on a voluntary basis, also researchers, faculty members of the school who bring their knowledge, the knowledge that is significant and relevant to the community, and also a technical team made up of 4 graduate students, 2 social workers and 2 graduates in communication. And for many years, we were under the coordination of other leaders who provide us with guidance. We would like to share with you the approach, what Martin was describing. What is the perspective of this program? What is the framework of reference for this program? This program is a place for popular education inside the universities. Oscar Jara, a teacher in popular education in Latin America, says that popular education is an emancipatory, ethical, political, and pedagogical proposal. So this is a process of theory and practice where the knowledge produced in the university is connected to the community and linked to the needs of the context. We are also part of a movement that is called critical extension that brings together projects and universities throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. It aims at the training of educations and graduates with an engagement to and a commitment to social transformation. We also aim at democratizing the university to put an end to the history of exclusion for certain groups in the population. So it tries to make the university more democratic, and it wants communities to establish a dialogue with the university about their needs in order to come up with projects. And we also talk about knowledge ecology. We can say that the knowledge ecology enables us to establish this dialogue. We acknowledge one another. We acknowledge the knowledge that is produced in the academia and also in the community, knowing that we can have a collective dialogue here. Since 2002, we have had a lot of lines of action as part of the program. I'm not going to dwell into all of this. If during the Q&A you want to go deeper into these, I can give you more information, but the course that started this program had to do with a strategy that was sustained over the 20 years. And there were some actions that endured over the course of these 20 years, and others were changed based on the demands from the organizations, the changes in their context and in social policy. But the main action line is courses developed for members of community organizations inside the university. So we bring them to our classrooms to share knowledge, methodologies, perspectives. The course began as a general training course. And then due to continuous assessment, it looked into other proposals, housing, habitat, gender violence, other topics. So we had a lot of courses that spinned off, linked to the training needs of organizations. So it became a dialogue between those who lead the program and the organizations that participate in the activities.
Durante estos años, bueno, además, se fueron haciendo otras estrategias.
Over the years, other strategies were put into place. We are interested in mentioning some of them. Every year, we have a contests for projects, and the university devotes some funding to sponsoring some initiatives. Those initiatives benefit also from the support received from the university for implementation. So we always try to plan the priorities of the program together, jointly. So we established an advisory council made up by members of the organizations, and with them, we set the priorities for the program. We also have a fair of social economy producing organizations that has existed since 2017. Materials have been produced, experiences have been systematized so that the knowledge that is exchanged can be part also of the literature, the bibliography of these organizations. We want to replicate these experiences also in other spaces, but also we want to be part of the literature used in the university. And as Martin said, during the pandemic, we had to rethink our strategies. The pandemic hit hard on the most vulnerable sectors, and organizations, as usual, were there to provide support to the community. And some short radio shows were developed to give voice to the organizations during the pandemic. There were other initiatives carried out over these 20 years, but let me say that we are so happy to put faces to this. That is why we have a video to share with you. You will see some images that illustrate what I'm telling you about now. Apologies, there is no sound. The program was created in 2002. More than 1,600 organizations participated. Activities are carried out by students, graduates, researchers, and faculty members from the 5 programs existing in the School of Social Sciences. Training courses for community leads, a seminar on popular education for students and graduates, support in projects carried out in the territory, in schools, in the classrooms, in the streets. The school and the organizations think and work together. Well, can you hear me now? I know that the video had no audio. I know that you could see the images, but you couldn't hear the audio, but it was just music that I'm sure that all of you have imagined the music accompanying those images. Well, this is just to share with you the happiness that this kind of joint activities instill in us. Let me briefly tell you about the role of students and graduates so that we can have a few minutes for questions. Martin, perhaps we can move the slides forward. As Martin told you, We have students from the 5 programs in the School of Social Sciences, Sociology, Communication, Sciences, Political Sciences, Social Work, and another one, the students can join the program. This is an optional activity for them. It is not part of the curriculum of the students program, but we think that it supplements their education. Students that join us are responsible for coordinating the workshops, coordinating group activities, recording experiences, and also providing support to projects in the territories. Students learn together with community leaders. They learn from their realities, from their intervention strategies. We believe that this is essential in order to see what kind of graduates we want to produce. Graduates that are committed to their communities. We try to make sure that this is an integral practice, a comprehensive practice. In Uruguay, our colleagues talk about having this kind of integrated practices, although we still have a challenge to integrate all these with the teaching and research components. This is an interdisciplinary space. There are not too many spaces like this in the university. Here we can get together from different programs. There are some collective learning processes. We recognize the knowledge provided by all the participants. We have these processes to feel and think, links, ties, feelings, what happens to us as we learn. And also we have artistic expressions included in these processes that move us to think differently, to use our hands, our emotions. We use different languages that enable us to challenge the written language as the only type of language that the academia can use. So this brings us closer to other realities. There is an Argentine educator, Carlos Sclia, who says, we have been trained as individuals who are highly capable of talking about others and highly unable to talk with others. So here we seek to approach problems from different perspectives, to propose different educational processes, to bring forward other methodologies to teach and learn, and also to build knowledge collectively. We think that this is one special way of educating students with organizations. In 2019, we systematized the experiences, and we would like to share with you some testimonials from students, what students say about their experience with this program. Leandro Suar, who is a graduate in political sciences, would say that coming through this collective experience in the program was a source not only of learnings and experiences, but also a great connection to reality that was necessary and stimulating. Camila Cogliano, who is a social work student, said sharing meetings was something very significant, not just because of the academic component, but also because of the human experience. Debating and exchanging experiences to create knowledge. Lucia, who is also a social work student, would say, this allows us to have a dialogue, to exchange information, to learn from different experiences. And more importantly, we can conceive that this is a collective fight, that we act towards the same goal, to take a stake for university democratization and collective knowledge generation that can allow us to go beyond the classroom to meet those in the territory, and at the same time to incorporate political and social agents into the university. Well, if you want, I can stop here in order to have a few minutes for a Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you.